Hi, everybody. I'm Joe.
And I'm Mary.
And I'm Alex.
And we're Book Buds.
And today we are doing an interview with Alex Parise, the author of The Fork. This is a post-apocalypse book that's set in Philadelphia, and it talks about all about the communities that arise and the things that they have to go through for survival. So thanks so much for being here with us, Alex.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yes, so are we. This is our first author interview, so we are just psyched about this here on Book Buds.
This is my first author interview too. It's awesome.
So first off, Alex, can you tell us a little bit about your inspiration for The Fork?
It's really hard for me to pin down one particular inspiration for The Fork. It came from a lot of places. One of the big places was being involved in community gardening and really learning about growing food and growing vegetables close to other people and in a place where you're really sharing skills with other people. And some people have knowledge about tomatoes, some people have knowledge about peppers, you may have knowledge about carrots. It's really great to be in a community garden and to really share those skills with other people and really learn a lot of things and teach a lot of things at the same time. As I said, there's a lot in The Fork. One of the big influences was that I was involved in some leftist politics in a town that I used to live in, New Brunswick, New Jersey. And a lot of the interactions for the characters are inspired by what I would see happening, where things that would happen politically would impact people's relationships, and people's relationships would impact things that were happening politically. Nothing of course overt in the book, like no one would look at this and be like, oh, this is my relationship. But the whole idea of how politics and personal life intertwines and how it's impossible to separate the two is really a part and parcel of the tension in the book and in real life, I think, too.
Mm-hmm.
Another big inspiration for the book is Philadelphia. I think that Philadelphia is a fantastic city, one of the best cities in the United States. And I probably would have moved there, but I didn't want to move there directly because I knew I would never leave if I did. So a lot of the book was just inspired by walking around Philadelphia and imagining, what would this little alley look like once there's no human intervention, once, nature really started to take over. All the locations in the book are real locations. You can go to all of them and see them. Well, no, that's not true. The Spectrum, the old sports stadium, no longer exists. It existed when I wrote the book, but it's been demolished since. But I guess maybe it's a little bit of a period piece of an apocalypse. The other big inspiration for the book was that I've read or watched a lot of post-apocalyptica, and there's a certain, not all post-apocalyptica, but a lot of it has a very right-wing, very conservative, very, rugged individualism sort of vibe to it. If you, and that exists through to today. If you'll see on Twitter occasionally some dude in California will be like, I'm going to rate the people on my timeline as to who's going to survive the post-apocalypse. And invariably, it's all the men in his life who are probably computer programmers like me and just sit at their computer are the ones who survive, and the women all die in this guy's, thing. And I find it really frustrating that such a cool genre would be so unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
That there's this just sort of focus on rugged individualism when that's not how we survive. We survive because of other people in our lives. I think in the last year, we've seen a lot of that, we see grocery workers now as essential workers, and we know that how hard it is that to survive without this community around us. And I really wanted to talk about the community and try to have an answer in a way that that idea in a lot of apocalyptica, that it's only through rugged individualism that we survive. Oh, that is my cat, Helena, who is very
Hi, Helena.
She had to run.
Would Helena like to see our scene that we made of your book? Here on BookBuds, we always do reenactments of the books that we review. Can we share it with you guys?
Yes, please. I'd love to.
Okay. Freeman, let's go check this place out. It looks pretty picked over.
Wow. Oh, look, here are some things right here. Look,
Book?
we got some books.
We don't need any books. What would we do with them?
Can't you read?
I can't read. That's worthless.
Well, I can read.
You can?
Well, sure.
Do you think you could teach me?
Of course I can teach you.
Okay.
I can't believe you don't know how to read.
That's
All right, well,
pretty.
these...
Then take it, I guess.
Yeah, I think these could be useful.
Okay.
All right, so we got
Oh,
another
look.
book.
Look. Somebody missed these.
Oh, great.
That's so great. They're so hard to come by.
Absolutely. Fork, knife, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
At least we found something.
Yeah. Let's go look down here, though. There's something over here. Let's go see what we can find. Freeman, I'm so happy we're coming out today to make sure these signs stay up on our trees, because otherwise we would lose our food source. Look, there's another sign for apples right here on the ground. We have to make sure this gets back up.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we definitely have to make sure these signs are up.
Yeah, because otherwise people are going to tear down our trees and use them for firewood.
You know, I could put words on these and teach people how to read.
Oh, that would help. You think people would be able to learn from you?
Oh, absolutely.
That would be amazing. That would help our survival so much. We really need to survive.
So, Alex, what'd you think of our scene?
Oh, that was so cool. Oh, I love it. Where did you where'd you find that background? Was that like a boiler room that you were in?
Oh, that was like a abandoned structure thing that we filmed by at one spot. We're not quite sure what it was, but one day the door was left open and we just had to stick a camera in there and video the spot because we needed to capture it and knew that it would come in handy one day. So it became a part of your scene.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool. Very, very true to the spirit of the book.
Right. Thanks.
Love it.
Now, that main character, Freeman, he's a guy you really want to have around.
Yeah, yes and no. Freeman's got a lot of skills, but he's also got a lot of pride, and he really he goes down the rabbit hole, I guess, sometimes, and really gets so focused on what he is really thinking about and what his goals are that he is willing to not pay attention to the goals of the community and the needs of the community. And a lot of the tension in the book, a lot of the plot in the book does come from this, idea of putting your personal goals ahead of the goals of the community and vice versa.
Yeah, he really does make some poor choices. That's true. But, thinking about his skill, I would love to have him around to preserve some foods for me and like make some machinery and things like that. He's got lots of skills. So many things that, would help with basic survival. How did you research all those different survival techniques?
Well, it's pulled from a lot of different places. As I said, a lot of it came from just doing it. And community gardening was something that I used to do a lot of. And, just doing it and just, growing plants year over year and seeing how they change and seeing what works better for some plants, what works worse for some plants, and learning from other people. One of the scenes in the book, which is actually the cover, the gleaners have a map of all the fruit trees in Philadelphia that have sprung up on the wall of their house. I had a very similar map, not on the wall, of the city that I lived in, again, New Brunswick. And, I would, ride my bike to the community garden, I had a little bike trailer. I would do my work there. And then depending on what was ripe, I would sort of ride around the city and I would go to this cherry tree, or I would go to this Cornelian cherry tree, or I would go out to the wineberries. And, sort of getting into the flow of what was ripe when, and when you could harvest what when, and what was publicly accessible when, because there's fruit trees everywhere, and there's fruit that you can eat everywhere. And, going out and just gleaning fruit is a really fun thing to do.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, there was another major source for a lot of the technology in the book, and that's this really cool series of books called Foxfire that were published in the 60s. Foxfire was an oral history, and it was a project that was done by, I believe, a university in Georgia. And the students at the university went out into the Appalachians and met with people who lived without electricity, in a really rural way, and wrote down their stories, both their folk stories and, you know, their sort of mythology, but also how they would go about, you know, living off the land, how they would, you know, find plants that they knew they could eat or medicinal plants, and also their skills. You know, there's all sorts of stuff in the book about, you know, how to, in the books, excuse me, about how to, you know, build a butter churn when you don't have nails. It's just entirely made out of wood. And how do you make something watertight that's just made out of wood? No glue, no nothing, just wood. Or you have no electricity and you want to make something round. How do you make a lathe with only rope and a barn and a piece of wood? And there's, you know, the book's just full of different ways to live in a low-tech way. And it's really cool to have that written down, because it's something, it's a part of our culture, it's a part of our history as Americans that doesn't really exist anymore. It's a lifestyle that doesn't exist, but it did 50 years ago. It's kind of crazy to think about. Another big inspiration was that I'm a total sucker for museums. I will go to any museum anytime and check out what's going on. And history, living history museums are really cool. Watching people reenact ways to live in the 1700s without technology, without electricity, is just super cool. But even not living history museums, you know, the Trenton Battlefield Museum in New Jersey, they have, you know, an entire field surgeon's tent set up there that you can sort of like look around and see all these tools for field surgery that are truly scary, and you wouldn't want them used on you. But
wow,
it's really cool to see how people lived back in the day and back in the old days before we had all these modern things. And all of that is really where the skills came from, because in the apocalypse, like, we're not going to have things like electricity to depend on. So I wanted to show how old skills could be useful in the future.
Something else we wanted to ask you about was the characters Molly and Freeman. They lived in this collective community just outside the Fork that was really focused on not having a leader, being able to like make shared decisions. And I feel like you touched on that a little bit, but could you tell us a little bit more about that inspiration?
Yeah, so I've lived in, for most of my adult life, I've lived in shared housing. And a lot of times when you live in shared housing, you meet people through Craigslist. And so it's a total stranger, and you're going to suddenly be sharing your space with them. And I highly recommend it to everybody. I've made some amazing friends, and of course had some not so good times as well, but have made some amazing friends through shared housing. And part of what's interesting about living in a house share instead of, you know, living with just your parents, or if you're a parent living with just your kids, in a family, you have this, you know, power dynamic where, you know, dad or mom gets to say what goes down. Here in shared housing, that doesn't fly. Everyone has to get along together. Everyone has to come to decisions at the house as a group. You don't get the power dynamics very different. So, you know, a lot of the Fork, a lot of it happens during house meetings where they're making decisions by everyone arguing about what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and going through all the different possibilities of what everyone's priorities are. And, you know, that's something that was very much drawn out of personal experience, though obviously not post-apocalyptica, but like, you know, how do we split up the electricity bill? The book was really inspired in a lot of ways by a place that I lived in New Brunswick, on a street called Hale Street. We jokingly referred to it as the Hale Street Collective. And a lot of us, you know, we were all college students, but we were also all crafters. So one of the ways that we would all hang out is that we would, throw on a movie in the living room, and one person would knit, and one person would sew, and one person would be painting, and I would be doing stained glass, like in the back.
I love that.
We would
That's so cool.
we would all be working on these projects together, and
So wait, is that your stained glass in the back there?
That is, yeah.
I caught my eye immediately. That's so cool.
Thank you. Yeah, so we would all, do things together, and that house and those people, that was the most magical point in my life, and that really informed a lot of what was going on in the Fork, and it's informed a lot of my later life. There's more to it than that, though, because the collective, the Gleaners and the collective have a sort of more formal method of making decisions, and also the stakes are higher for them. When you're living in a house and it's a bunch of college students, if someone moves out, you can replace them. It's easy enough. You don't want to do that, but it definitely happens where someone will just leave and you're like, okay, well, I'm going on Craigslist and getting someone else. That isn't something that would really fly for the Gleaners of the collective. They have to have a more stable situation. So the decision-making process is a little more formal for them. They do, everyone comes together and they have their house meeting, and then they vote on ideas by, either putting a white bean or a black bean in a little pot. And so a secret ballot sort of way to go about it. And that, while the actual mechanism is more made up, it's drawn really heavily from both Quakerism and a political philosophy known as anarcho-syndicalism. So the book, it draws heavily from anarchist theory. And I know anarchists get a bad name. It doesn't mean, anarchy doesn't always mean there are no rules and it's just a free-for-all. Anarcho-syndicalism is more, the phrase is always no gods, no masters. It's not that there are no rules. It's that the group that's impacted by it comes together and decides on the rules themselves. So you don't have the rules being pushed down. The rules are generated from the community. And, there's groups like Food Not Bombs that you may have heard of that, operate on these principles where people come together, where peers come together, and they decide to do things for the good of all. Quakers, when Quakers go through this sort of group decision making, they will often not actually come to a decision until everyone in the group is satisfied with the decision that's being made. That was something that I didn't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on in the book, because it's a really good way to not get anything done. It's really hard, as I'm sure everyone here knows, to have everyone happy with a given situation. So I sort of introduced the idea of the lesser consensus and the greater consensus in the collective's decision making, where they would decide, the lesser consensus is basically a bare majority, 50% plus one. And then the greater consensus would be everyone. And so they would argue through these ideas, and everyone would get their opinions on the ideas out, their contributions to the ideas out there, and really come to a good decision of how to move forward as a group instead of as solitary actors who just live in one place.
I love how your book focuses on community living and working together to solve a problem, because today's technology is just, forcing these kids alone in their room with the screen. And, I work with kids, so I have learned that kids of today cannot work together to solve a problem. They just can't do it. And it's very concerning. Like, they don't have those skills.
It is very concerning. And I agree with you. Some of it, I'm sure, is just the last year of COVID has been so rough for all of us. So some of it's just down to that, where everyone's been sort of stuck in their house. Some of it, though, I think is a little deeper than just the last year. Like, we have this mythology in America of, the lone settler going out there and, I am going to go, what was that movie? The Bear Man movie? I'm going to go out there and brave my way through the wilderness. Or, we're going to homestead this land and it's just going to be my family and we don't need to be together. We can do it ourselves. And I don't know that that's the best way to be as a society. I think we should work together more. It has its downsides too. I mean, there's the famous joke about, I want my college group partners to be the pallbearers at my funeral so that they can, let me down one last time. And that happens.
I love it.
Yeah, you gotta love it. But also, in those situations, a lot of times the project that's being worked on is being handed down from outside. So is everyone actually invested in the project? Maybe not. It's worth it, I think, to think about bringing groups of people together who have a problem that they want or need to solve and want to solve it in the way that they want to solve it. And I think arguing against, the only way to get this done is for me to do it, is for, just one person to do it, is I think worthwhile. I think it's worth getting more ideas of community and collective living and collective problem solving out there.
One of the unique things about this book was the page numbering and the order. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'd like before we get to the page numbering, there's some other things happening. The book does have a unique structure. So each page in the book is self-contained and is a scene or is a fragment of a scene. So when you transition, when you're reading the book and you get to the end of a page, when you get to the next page, it's a new scene. Part of that is because it's a meditation on memory. And I always sort of imagined that the book's being told by Freeman, or Freeman's telling his story the next day. This is, 15, 20 years after the events of the book, and he's sitting in some stockade in Ohio, and he's thinking about his past, and he's going to tell the story the next day, and he's getting everything together in his head. So the book is structured in a way where he's remembering all these things. And at the beginning of the book, what's happening is sort of the lower stakes or the medium stakes emotional stuff. It's a hard world that these characters live in. They go through a lot in the book. They go through a lot in general. There's a lot of trauma. And they, so as Freeman's remembering, things are going from this lower stakes to, as the book moves along, there's higher stakes stuff and there's, bigger stuff. An example is Freeman's an orphan and he's orphaned in an act of violence. And he really pushes thinking about that until the end of the book, even though it informs him and his choices all the way through the book. At the same time, he's thinking about these really hard things to think about. He's avoiding thinking about hard things by thinking about simpler things, or just like machines and how he built a machine. So he's sort of going back and forth between the higher stakes stuff, the harder stuff, and the easier stuff as the book progresses and as he gets closer to thinking about the end of his story. The other piece to this another piece to this is that I have a background in biochemistry, and I think about narratives in a similar way to how I think about proteins. So a protein is, at its simplest, a string of amino acids. But when you just look at a string of amino acids as, a straight line, or if you look at a narrative in a straight line, the amino acids in the protein are non-functional when they're just laid out flat. A protein doesn't become functional until it folds itself up, and amino acids that are at either end of the chain get pushed next to one another and then can chemically interact and can interact with chemicals outside of the protein. Those are called active sites. And I think about narratives and memories in the same way. Something happened, 10 years ago, but it takes on a whole new meaning with something that happened yesterday when you can push them together. So memory is fluid, and memories change, and how memories impact you and how they impact a story or how they impact a character changes over time as the various events that make up a life sort of bang together and get mixed up in your head. So I told the story in a way that I thought had those events come together in ways that gave them more meaning. But then we get to the page numbering. So the page numbering there's a couple pieces to it. One of the pieces is that, so when you look at a page of the book, the number on the right-hand side is the page number, as you would expect in a traditional book. On the left-hand side, there's a variant set of page numbers. Those page numbers are the book in chronological order. So, the first page of the book, I think the two different page numbers are like 1 and 450, something like that. And the idea there is that I wanted to play with a postmodern concept called La Mort d'Arthur, which is, of course, a play on words of the French, the death of King Arthur. But the idea is, at its simplest, that when a text goes out into the larger world, the reader's interpretation of the book is as important or more important than the author's intention in writing the book.
I've heard singer-songwriters say that too.
Yeah, it's very much the same. Like, it's not just a book. It's the text, it's the movie, it's the, whatever it is. The intention of the creator isn't as important as the interpretation of the consumer of the media.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of wanted to take to invite the reader into that more than I guess a traditional author does, and like give the reader an opportunity to really impact the book in a way that you don't get to do in all books. So if you were to take the book and you were to cut the binding off of it, straight up that, you could take the pages of the book and using the variant page numbers that are in there, put the book into chronological order if you wanted to read it that way. You could also read the book and be like, a guy who wrote this is wrong. This is the wrong order. It should be in this order. You could put the book in any order that you wanted. But in order to do that, much like an author, you have to take an irrevocable step and actually physically change the book in order to do it. You don't get to just do it willy-nilly. You need to make that decision. And I wanted to give the reader the opportunity to make that decision on their own. That's part of why I published the book Creative Commons, which is also known as copyleft. It's different from a traditional copyright in that I, as the author, am giving up some of my rights to the book. Basically, the book can be remixed as it wants to be, as any reader wants to be. So a reader could take the book, reorder it, and then put it out on the internet for free and say, no, this is how this book should be read. And, I'm sort of like giving up that right to be the authority of it. Though, of course, for non-commercial purposes only, not for sale. One of the questions that I'm asked is, could you completely randomize the book, and would it make sense if you read it completely randomly? And I'm probably not the expert on that, but I do know that one of my alpha readers, after I gave her a printout of the book, and she just took that printout and threw it up into the air, and then put all the pages back together on a stack and read it. And she told me it made sense. I have no idea if the emotional impact would be the same. I have no idea if there are random orders that make more sense or less sense. I'm not sure of that, but it's something that you can definitely do with the book if you want to.
Awesome. That's very exciting. Now, can you tell folks how they can get their hands on this book? Where is it available?
Yes, so it's available on Amazon, and it's available, on any of the other digital bookstores that are out there. It is available for Kindle. though given the structure of the book, varying phone screens and varying Kindle sizes do impact the readability, which is a shame. There's not much to be done about that. So I do recommend reading it on paper, though you can read it digitally as well. I can also be contacted on Twitter or on Facebook by direct message on either platform, and can ship copies directly if you don't want to give Jeff Bezos any money, which I get. And if you do order from me directly, I have some swag that I can throw in with the book for you. So
awesome. We'll put all your information in the description below for folks that are interested in buying the book.
Awesome. Thank you.
So we heard that you're working on a new book. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
I am. So I'm actually working on the first book of what I think is going to be a series, which is strange because I never really wanted to write a series before. But the idea came to me and let's run with it, right? It's going to be a space opera. I believe the title of the series is going to be The Adenian Orogeny. The main character of the book is a badass lady space communist geologist who is she's a geology postdoc, and she's going to travel around the galaxy with a crew of people on a ship called the Laramide and foil the plans of evil corporations using science.
Ooh. Wow. Okay.
I love it.
Yeah, so far it's a lot of fun to write, and I think if you're writing a space western and you're not having a good time writing it, you're doing something wrong, and I hope it'll be just as much fun to read.
That's awesome. We'll have to keep our eyes out for it so we can read that when it comes out. Thank you so much for taking all this time to talk with us today. It was really wonderful to talk about the fork. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate coming on, and gosh, that skit that you did is so good.
Thanks. Oh, before we close, we also are curious, do you have a favorite book or author?
But how could I possibly pick just a favorite book or author?
Yeah, we have a different favorite every day, really, over here.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many that I like. I love a book called Winter's Tale by Mark Halperin that actually does show up in the pages of the fork at one or two points. Which is interesting because Halperin was a speechwriter for Bob Dole, so it's a very conservative book, but it also is a beautiful book about cities and people who live in them. So a beautiful portrait of New York City. The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon is one of my favorites. I love a book, a more recent book called Night Film by Marisha Pessel. It's a wonderful labyrinth of a completely made up director's work, and it's horror, but it's not scary horror. It's more paranoia inducing horror. And I was reading it late at night. It was like,
That's great. We'll have to check that out.
Oh, there's just so many authors that I love.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Well, Alex, thank you for being here. This was very exciting for Book Buds, and we wish you luck on your next novel, and we can't wait for that to come out.
Thank you so much. I had a great time coming here. Thank you so much for talking to me.
All right. If you're enjoying Book Buds, give us a thumbs up.
And share us with your friends.
And subscribe to our channel,
Book
Buds.
Golly gee, that sounded like a great book. Be sure to subscribe.
But I'm very thankful. I think we actually have sound this time, and we've got 3 recordings of it. So
Right.
One of them has to have worked out.
I think so.
Right.
And you didn't even have to vanquish the air conditioner this time.
I know.